because we are in the South, there are a lot of plants that come from different places. So we do also have a lot of moths from different continents. And a lot of them are small too. Like one of the prettiest moths I think I've ever seen, I believe it was the Suzuki moth. It's orange. And I mean,
cool.
So the prettiest little thing. And tiny. I mean, not even my thumb. The size of my thumbnails.
For clarity, both of you have normal sized thumbs. So if you're listening to this, it's not like they don't have giant cartoon thumbs. They are normal sized human thumbs. Hey there, Podcast Aquanauts. It's your host, Casey here. Believe it or not, it's Moth Week again. Or if, like me, you had no idea there was such a thing as Moth Week, surprise, it's Moth Week. If asked which they prefer, moths or butterflies, most people would probably say they think butterflies are tops. Setting aside the fact that butterflies, spoiler, are moths, this is, yet again, a case of nature not doing a great job with its public relations. Not only are there more species of moths than those that are taxonomically classified as butterflies, they're arguably more beneficial since, according to some of the experts at the Xerces Society, they're more generalist and fly faster than butterflies, meaning they can pollinate more plants in a shorter time. We'll dig into the many reasons moths are worth celebrating in this week's episode, but suffice it to say that moths aren't just butterflies of the night. They're a lot cooler and more beneficial than that, as you'll soon learn. So with that, let's get to it, shall we? On with the podcast. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. This week is National Moth Week, which I did not realize was a thing until I started to work here and had to keep a lot of animal-centric holidays and weeks and months straight in my head. And as it turns out, this is, in fact, the week in which we are supposed to celebrate the, I'm going to call them the underappreciated cousins of butterflies, which we'll decide whether that's actually an accurate assessment in the course of this conversation. But to join me for this conversation about moths, I brought in Rose Segbers, who is a frequent guest on this show, but we talk a lot about the squishy, crunchy things here at the aquarium that I think are sort of your purview as our senior entomologist. Rose, thank you for joining us again.
Sure do. Great to be here.
And then coming back for her, I think this is your second appearance, is Stephanie Soto, who is, your title has changed a couple of times. Let's see if I've got it right. Are you currently the formal learning experience supervisor?
Yes.
Okay. And both of you were on this because when I saw that it was National Moth Week, I thought, who do I know who likes moths? And both of you immediately came to mind. So we'll talk about why you like moths. In fact, let's actually, before we talk about that, let's talk about if people are maybe meeting you for the first time, even you, Rose, after your many appearances, how long have you been at the aquarium, and what exactly do you do here?
So I have been at the aquarium for coming up on 5 years. It'll be 5 years in September. And I am the senior entomologist here at the aquarium. My responsibility, or at least my most visible responsibility here, is the butterfly garden. But I also take care of pretty much every terrestrial invertebrate in some way, shape, or form at the aquarium.
When I say things that are crunchy and squishy, I mean things that don't have bones. So as you said, invertebrates. And Stephanie, how long have you been here? It feels like you're closing on some sort of a milestone. And what exactly do you do here?
Yeah, funny enough, I hit 5 years in November. Amazing. So how exciting. 5 years in November. And as the formal learning experiences supervisor, I do the outreach team. So we go out, and whether it's schools, libraries, or our local parks, and just teach people about nature and science in a very informal way. Sometimes it's standard aligned for teachers, of course. And then sometimes it's just a fun nature hike in the woods.
Yeah, you sometimes, your sister works on our comms team, Bianca.
Oh, yeah.
And so I hear a lot about the things that you're involved in, and a lot of them, if I were not, encumbered by other responsibilities, I would love to take part in, some of which we'll probably talk about in the course of this conversation because they do actually have to do with moths. But before we get too deep into those woods, let's talk about why you like moths, because as I said, both of you immediately sprung to mind when I thought of people who are fans of moths at the aquarium. Let's start with you, Stephanie. Why do you like moths? And do you like moths? Or am I mischaracterizing this?
I actually, I I can't stand them. No, I love moths so much. I didn't always like moths. I was not a bug person my whole life. I did transition to that. And moths are just so cool, so different in many ways. The diversity of moths is insane, from shape, size, color, to what they do. The first time I saw a bagworm moth that just had little sticks on their cocoon. It's like, what? This little caterpillar is gathering all these sticks. How neat is that? And then, a big thing is there are so many more moths than butterflies. Like in Tennessee, I think it's almost like 2,000 species of moths. I think it's like between 15 and 100 and 2,000. And then butterflies is like 150.
Wow.
So the diversity is huge.
I had no idea.
Yeah, there's so many to see, and sometimes you think they're like a fly, but it's actually a moth.
Very cool. Rose, how about you?
Similar. I have always kind of been a moth fan. My reason has changed a little bit over the years. Moths have been experiencing kind of a renaissance in popularity, but originally, I'm a huge fan of an underdog, and I love an underappreciated species. I think none of you will ever let me live it down. When I first got hired here, I said that cockroaches are some of my favorite insects. And
literally comes up in every appearance on this show.
Right. I think it's always important to bring it back to this because I hear it all the time, so you guys got to hear it all the time. But yes, they're a very, very old taxa as well. Lepidoptera is generally compared to just like the subgroup of butterflies. So they've developed some really kind of oddball, unusual morphologies and relationships with other species. And there's just a lot to know about not butterflies. There's just a lot to know about moths.
Well, I think it's going to be unavoidable for us to probably talk a lot about butterflies, often in the same breath as moths, for a lot of the reasons that you've both just kind of touched on, which is that they look similar, even though there's less speciation or diversity in butterflies than moths. Let's touch on that. So, if there are so many fewer butterflies than there are moths, why is it? Or maybe it's just it landing differently or incorrectly with me. Why does it seem like the public is more enamored with butterflies than moths if there are so fewer of them in comparison?
I can take it.
Yeah,
well, for one thing, they're prettier. People, I mean...
I hope no moths are listening to this. They're going to be very offended.
Right? It was mean. Okay, they're more conventionally attractive. We'll say it that way.
That's fair.
They're also more diurnal. They're larger, like I said, showier.
So diurnal meaning they're out during the day.
Yes, they're out when the people are out. And people are more likely to see them pollinating their flowers, and people are just generally more likely to see them. They're oftentimes, especially in this part of the world, a lot larger than the average moth. People will think of polyphemus moths and that sort of thing, and the giant silk moths, and those are huge and those are gorgeous, but they aren't really representative of the average moth. The average moth is just kind of a little guy that's about the size of my thumbnail, and I think that's another part of it as well. Butterflies tend to be very visible, they tend to be very showy, and we tend to, I think, nurture a better relationship with butterflies than we do with moths. Like, we talk about how they pollinate our flowers. We're encouraged not to be afraid of them. Like, when we go out in the wild as when we're kids, we're told, oh, that's a butterfly, and people are excited. But sometimes when you see a moth, people get a little guarded, a little nervous. And sometimes people will call things that are actually moths butterflies because they think they're pretty and they like them and they're day flying. So I think that's a large part of it. Just our relationship generally, I think, is stronger with butterflies than it is with moths.
Okay, those are all very fair. So Stephanie, you in the course of that outreach that you mentioned earlier being part of your job, how often have you, or can you give me some examples of times when you have done some outreach that very specifically was focused on moths, or that moths were maybe under the umbrella of whatever it was that you were doing with the public in a program?
Yeah, I think to kind of go off what Rose was saying, I think media has played like a big part of kind of how we see butterflies and moths. So when we do our pollinator programming, we have a lot of pollinator programs of let's build a garden together, or, who are pollinators here in Tennessee? We never leave out moths. That's a big one that we mention. And everyone else. We mentioned the flies and the beetles. That, again, these are kind of some of the bugs that we're more hesitant with, whether it's we don't know about them or it's because they're here at night. So it's scary going out in the dark and hiking, right? Something you got to get used to. So since they're out there at night and they're just flying, we happen to be in the way. It can kind of make us feel funny, but that's what we do. We do a lot of night hikes in the fall, and we'll make sure to bring out UV lights so we can, still see but not bother some of the nocturnal animals. And we love to find moths and to kind of see the patterns that they have. We also always highlight the flowers. We have a lot of blooming flowers at night. And the reason that they can be pollinated is moths, right? Moths take that job.
That's so cool. So a lot of it is really, it sounds like just, I think this is not uncommon for a lot of misunderstood species, some of which we've talked about, Rose. You've been on to talk about things about why we are scared of snakes and spiders. It feels like it's a little bit of a learned or an environmental fear that has nothing to do with the animal itself. It's entirely based on what we're told about it, or the circumstances in which you tend to find it, like you said, at night. That is understandable, being something that people would be a little bit nervous about doing. When you said that you brought out the UV light, I've described, or I sent you questions ahead of time, and I think I described what you're doing as mothing. Is that is that what you call it? And how does that work? And why is having light maybe important to attracting moths and showing people some of that diversity?
Yeah, mothing, it sounds so intense. But it's so funny because you just put up a white sheet. Not just, but you hang up a white sheet and you shine a UV light on it, right? You just, prop up a light bulb and then you wait. It is a lot of waiting for the moths to come. And I feel like I've seen a few different papers, and Rose, you can let me know kind of the latest stuff. But at first, I think we used to think moths were attracted to the UV, like they want to look at it and go up to it. But now it's actually, they reflect it off of their backs, off of their wings, which is why they land on the white sheet so that light bounces off. So it's kind of a cool way to see the diversity. I will say you're not attracting just moths.
Oh, you'll get all kinds
June
of
beetles, my goodness, they love a white sheet. But it's a fun way to see what we have and to carefully just ID who's there. We love to take pictures of them and then post them, of course, on iNaturalist, I should say, and see who we found.
Well, I should point out, you mentioned iNat. So the last time you were on the program, the show, you were talking about citizen science, and that site came up, and I guess app as well, came up quite a bit in that discussion. So that is what you're talking about, and I will link to that episode probably in the related episodes segment of the show. Oh, cool. In the course of doing a mothing exercise on a typical Tennessee evening, how many species might you see?
Oh, wow. I don't know. That's a question. I've seen upwards probably of 50 on just my back patio.
That's way more than I would have thought. Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of, like Rose was saying, they're small. So a lot of these, we see something fly up. You're like, oh, is this a type of fly? It's like, no, it's a small webworm moth. Or, because we are in the South, there are a lot of plants that come from different places. So we do also have a lot of moths from different continents. And a lot of them are small too. Like one of the prettiest moths I think I've ever seen, I believe the Suzuki moth. It's orange. And I mean,
cool.
So the prettiest little thing. And tiny. I mean, not even my thumb. The size of my thumbnails.
For clarity, both of you have normal sized thumbs. So if you're listening to this, it's not like they don't have giant cartoon thumbs. They are normal sized human thumbs.
Yes, but yeah, you could see crazy diversity here. It's so awesome.
All right, so I exclaimed in surprise at that there were 50 species in a single night. Rose, are you shocked to hear that there's that degree of diversity, or is that about what you would expect, knowing what you do about this part of the country and the moths that are found here?
I would expect probably a lot more than 50.
Whoa.
Yeah, this is just my apartment patio.
You're both blowing my mind.
Yeah, like in the city, definitely you'll get at least 50. But if you go out into the woods, you go hiking, you go out into a national park, and a lot of national parks do host moth nights, you will sometimes see hundreds of species. And like Stephanie just said, you won't just see moths. I've done black lighting in not all over the country, but a pretty wide variety of states. And you do get roaches. You get
It's a real win for you.
You get a lot of small, just flies, all kinds of stuff.
Okay. Lady beetles.
A lot more lady beetles than you would expect, as well as a lot more true bugs, too.
Yeah.
Like, everything kind of shows up. Mm-hmm. If it's out at night, it's probably going to, like, this is kind of older information, but historically the way it's been explained is a lot of insects use like the sun and the stars to kind of orient themselves, and they'll kind of putting a UV light out kind of short circuits that, and they'll gravitate more toward that. There is some evidence, yes, just like Stephanie was mentioning, that there is some evidence that they're like reflected off.
Oh, we're seeing pictures of the
Suzuki moth.
Oh my goodness. Stunning. Yes, they are beautiful moths.
It's really quite orange. You are correct.
And it's my favorite color.
Yes, they are beautiful. But yes, you'll see all kinds of different stuff, and you will see stuff from all over the world. We have a species of Ailanthus moth, which is gorgeous, but also kind of a disappointment to have, because we have Ailanthus here, which is tree of heaven. It attracts a lot of beautiful species that are bad news to have here. But yes, back on topic, you can sometimes see hundreds and hundreds of different species when you go out mothing at night.
Wow. Now, we're talking a lot about an animal that it might, if you visited the aquarium, you might be wondering, like, why, if this is the Tennessee Aquarium, I've been there, I don't recall seeing a lot of moths. So we have a butterfly garden. And actually, currently at the moment, I'm going to let you talk about this, but there are occasional, it feels like, guest appearances by moths. But do we, on the regular, have moths in the butterfly garden? Because that gets complicated as far as I know, as far as like regulations and permits and that sort of thing.
Yes, so they have to be on our permit, and I do have a handful of what are called giant silk moths on our permit. And just because they're beautiful species, and I can release, they're easy to tell the males and the females apart, which is the main drawback of moths, is that I can't breed anything in the butterfly garden. And moths tend to have wider varieties of food. They tend to be specialists less frequently. So many species of moths will have very, very wide varieties of things they will lay their eggs on for their caterpillars to eat. But that's not a problem with the giant silk moths, because you can usually pretty easily tell the difference between the males and the females. Right now we have kind of a unique visitor. This is a first-time silk moth that we've had as long as I've been doing this, which is about a decade, and it is a Madagascar comet moth.
So cool.
None of them have emerged yet. Well, a couple of them have kind of emerged, but none of them are like fully open, ready to go yet. But all this week, they should be kind of slowly emerging, and if we get any males, I will be releasing them in the garden, and the best time to see them would probably be first thing in the morning and toward the end of the day when we are just closing up for the day.
The Tennessee Aquarium's Podcast Aquatic is made possible by support from the Tennessee Conservationist, the official magazine of Tennessee state parks. Each issue is filled with fascinating stories about Tennessee's native species, rich history, and unique culture. It's also your guide to exploring state parks and planning your next outdoor adventure. Subscribe today at tnconservationist.org. Very cool. So the cocoon, so moths make cocoons, butterflies make chrysalises. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But one of the cocoons I was in yesterday, just walking through the garden, and saw that one of the cocoons was split. And I'm assuming that's what you're saying, like they're not quite fully out yet. It's a process.
So our vendor actually likes to determine if they're male or female before he sends them to us. So he will split open the cocoons, just have a quick look at them, and then kind of put them back together and ship them to us. It's probably also worth mentioning so people know what they're looking for, just to relate them to a native species. Madagascar comet moths are very closely related to our native Luna moths. And they look like giant Luna moths when they come out of their chrysalis. They can be up to 8 foot long, including the tails.
Holy cow.
So, and if you go in there and see them right now,
very good.
You'll notice that the cocoons are like this size of like an avocado, I think.
They're huge.
Yeah,
they're really big.
Yeah.
They're really big.
So they're great. And the pupa are inside, and you can see them kind of split open. I have them kind of in a way so that ideally when they come out, they'll be able to hang and dry off and just kind of hang out with me and be very visible.
Wow.
So, but we do have other species as well. We do also get atlas moths, which have the honor of being some of the largest moths through like surface wing area in the world.
They're really, really big. Those are pretty incredible. I had no idea that the Madagascar, what did you say it was?
Comet moths.
Comet moths. Yes. I had no idea they were that big. Although again, looking at that cocoon, it does make sense.
It's mostly those tails at the end. Like they'll be like 4 inches by maybe 6 inches. And then there are these huge tails kind of hanging down at the bottom, which is why they don't rival the Atlas moth in like surface area.
That's still incredible. Cool. So why do they have that long tail?
You know, this is like just kind of a working theory. I don't know if any evidence has been tested, but I'm guessing a similar reason that swallowtails are supposed to have their tails, which is if there's something like big and dangly on the other side of an animal's body, it provides kind of an advantage because something that's trying to eat them, like a bird, will go after the dangly bit at the end instead of the face with all the important stuff in it.
Got it. Okay.
And there's probably no different with these guys.
So you mentioned the Luna moth, and I think for a lot of people, if you think about butterflies, I think we've talked about this, that I think the like species that most people immediately think of for most of the world is probably the monarch.
Yes.
What would you say is the equivalent of the monarch as far as moths are concerned? Like when you think of moth, like what's the stereotypical moth that you think of? For me, at least, it is the Luna moth. Do either you have ones that more immediately spring to mind than that?
I know. I would say probably the Luna moth or like the death head, the hawk moth. Because again, going back to like media, I feel like moths are always attributed to like horror or death.
Like, so that would be Silence of the Lambs.
I was going to say, I love Silence of the Lambs. However, that poor moth is now portrayed. So I think that one is pretty iconic as well.
Okay. So Death's Head?
I would have to agree. Probably Death's Head, Luna moth. My personal favorite native species is the rosy maple moth, which is cute. They're adorable.
Well, you have to. All right, we're on an audio podcast, so paint a word picture for us.
Like a pink yellow swirl moth. It makes you the best way to look at it. It looks like ice cream. They're so cute.
Like a sherbet?
A little bit.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strawberry lemon.
All right. So we haven't really, we've talked again. I said that we would, and we've lived up to it so far, talked about moths and butterflies in the same breath. So looking at them morphologically, or what are the differences? So when you what distinguishes a moth from a butterfly? And I'm looking at you, Rose, but I mean, Stephanie, you are obviously as much a part of this as Rose. So what are the distinctions between the two?
Yeah, I think the biggest things that we always talk to, especially kids about, is you can tell by their body shape. Their antennas are going to be very different, like the club versus the more feathery. Usually the way they land, you're going to have a more open wing versus like butterflies, kind of like it's vertical, their wings are closed. Moths are usually fuzzy. right?
Okay.
Fuzzy, thick-bodied, and butterflies are thinner and smooth. So those are kind of some of the main differences. And I think too, I guess you can't really see this part all the time, but butterflies butterflies have the proboscis, and a lot of moths are born without mouths.
Oh,
So that's a
I did
huge
not know
one.
that.
As well. So.
Yes, that's the big one. The ones that I think are the kind of normal traits are, yes, the clubbed antennae are considered to be like the very distinguishing feature that all butterflies have, that very few moths otherwise have.
So moths would be the ones with the feathery ones.
Yes. But or just kind of like a straight, they're called filamentous, where it's just kind of straight and pointy. Let me kind of paint a picture of you, and I am going to talk about evolution a little bit. Just from like a relationship standpoint, butterflies are kind of two moths or Lepidoptera. They're similar relationship-wise that birds are to dinosaurs, is the best way to describe it. They are moths. They are nestled deep in that taxonomic family. There are moths that are less closely related to each other than they are to butterflies.
Wow.
So butterflies are generally just a very, very fancy moth.
Okay, so all butterflies are moths, but not all moths are butterflies. Is that?
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I always tell people, because they're like, yeah, moths are so pretty. They're like night butterflies. And I'm like, wait, no, moths came first.
Other way around. Yes.
I'm like, butterflies are actually day moths.
Yes.
Okay, just by the way, FYI.
So really, accurate. If we wanted to be really accurate, we could call it the moth garden.
You could, absolutely. And you would be inclusive. You would include everything that's in there.
Can we sign a petition?
I will say probably as a member of the marketing and comms team that it doesn't have quite the ring to it. But I would appreciate the accuracy if nothing else. So we just touched on this a little bit in that you said, moths came first, but this is more of a value statement, subjective thing than anything else. But I asked you both to think of one thing that makes a moth better than a butterfly. Because again, there's so much of that bad PR and misrepresentation, and it's not their fault. So let's give them a chance to let's tout some quality about moths that, in your opinion, makes them superior to, or at least just as deserving of admiration as butterflies.
Ooh, I don't want to say they're better. Everyone's, we love them all. But I think one of the coolest things are the differences, too, that you can see is the chrysalis versus the cocoon. I think that's the coolest difference. You have the butterfly. They have their chrysalis made from like the exoskeleton, so that outer layer that comes off of the caterpillar to make the chrysalis. But then cocoons can be the silk that's woven by the caterpillar. It can be the gathering of sticks, the curling up of leaves. They're just so efficient and so neat. Like they've just had so much time to say, I don't have to waste energy making silk. There's plenty of dead leaves on the ground. Let me use that. So
work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And just to piggyback off that, there are some species of hawk moth that just bury themselves, a subterranean cocoon. Well, it's not even really a cocoon. They just pupate underground.
Like a beetle.
And yes, and they're the ground is what I'm trying to say becomes their cocoon. So honestly, different things the great part about, I think, moths are their diversity and all the different things they do. And plus, they do take the night shift, which butterflies do not do. While we're all asleep, moths are out pollinating things, and just like butterflies, and in a lot of ways, sometimes because they've been around so long, these evolutionary relationships can be even stronger and more exclusive. There are a lot of plants that are solely dependent on their moth pollinator in order to get around. Like yucca is the most famous one. They are very dependent on their moth pollinators. If one was gone, the other couldn't live anymore.
Wow. So I was looking something up as you were talking, because it occurred to me, I don't even know if this is actually a moth, but the hummingbird hawk moth.
It is.
It
Yeah.
is
The clear wing?
Yeah.
Okay, so I saw one of those when we were in Japan. And I had just read about them before we went on the trip, and I saw it looked every bit like a hummingbird, and I thought it just didn't, something about the way it moved or sounded just didn't look right. And I looked closer, I thought, oh my gosh, that's actually a hummingbird moth. So one of you who's actually an animal specialist, talk about what exactly I saw and what's so cool about it, because you're the expert, not me.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we have clear wing moths here as well.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I was going to say you have to kind of do a double take, because you think it's a bird. You think it's a hummingbird by the way they're flapping, but then when you actually look at them, they have the wings of a moth. They're just clear. You can kind of see through it, so it kind of throws the light off. But they also have that very long proboscis to pollinate, and they are out during the day. So that's a big one. Not all moths are technically nocturnal. They're out during the day too. But if you want to speak more on kind of the anatomy of it.
So I don't know if I have a whole lot to add there. Generally, I just say that I find it really interesting that hummingbirds are an exclusive North and South America taxa, and moths and the hummingbird moths are kind of cosmopolitan. They're all over the world. So it's incredible how this animal has kind of slid in to inhabit kind of the same niche that the hummingbird generally has done.
I never even thought about that. You're so right.
That is really
They
cool.
figured it out before the hummingbird did.
They probably did. And if you think about it, there are a lot of really neat adaptations too. Like there's a famous example, I think it was Darwin's moth, where there's, I want to say, the longest proboscis in the world is meant to exclusively pollinate a certain species of flower. And that species is, and I want to say the species that does that is a species of hawk moth, a day-flying hawk moth, and it has like a 6, 7, 8-inch proboscis, something absolutely off the wall.
That's insane. So
It's
it's
a
like
big
if your tongue were like 9 feet long, 10 feet long.
Yes, because the only thing you ever ate was like at the bottom of a well.
That's hilarious.
That is pretty funny. So that would be an example to bring some science terminology into it. Hummingbirds and hawk moths doing the same thing with similar adaptations, but in different places would be kind of an example of convergent evolution, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so another example of that that we talked about on this show would be the mantella frogs that you see in Madagascar that also have toxic skin, just like the poison dart frogs that you see in Central and South America. So they look very similar, they do similar things, but they're not taxonomically related. And obviously a hummingbird and a moth are not going to be, they're going to be even less closely related.
Yes.
Yeah, nature repeats itself.
Does.
It's easy.
And bringing it back to the Luna moth, the Luna moths have tails, swallowtails have tails. While they are both Lepidoptera, they're not closely related to one another. Swallowtails are more related, obviously, to other butterflies, and the Luna moth is a silk moth.
Yeah.
cool.
And when you talked about that, it reminded me of like when we take out our red-tailed boa, right? Beautiful snake. And then right at the end, the tail is nice and red and bright for the same reason of like, if you see me, attack the tail, not the head with all the brainy bits.
Right.
So that's a snake and a moth. That's crazy.
That's crazy. We talk about butterflies a lot in terms of them being a really common elementary school example that we hold up as learning about metamorphosis, right? So we've already, I think, skipped across this topic in the course of this conversation, but I do want to know, are there differences in how, well, do moths undergo metamorphosis? I think they do, but maybe I'm wrong. And if they do, do they undergo a different process than butterflies do? Or how are those processes different?
So they're very similar. I think I did kind of allude to, or Stephanie alluded to a little bit earlier on, because of how butterflies are very closely associated with plants. They don't really do kind of what I'm going to call the quick and dirty pupation, where they go underground or they bury themselves in leaves or they spin like a little house for themselves. They wind up pupating kind of out in the open, and they've developed all kinds of really interesting strategies for how to hide that. But otherwise, they're very, very similar to one another. They both have the wing discs that are present even from the time they're a caterpillar. They shed their skin and become a pupa and hang out as a pupa from anywhere from a week to 6-7 months if they overwinter as a chrysalis, and then they come out as a butterfly or moth.
Do they liquefy themselves like the butterflies do inside of the cocoon?
Yes, they
Good
do.
soup.
Gross.
The soup. They do make the soup.
Gross.
I do kind of want to correct, not correct, but kind of provide clarification to a common idea. They don't melt themselves entirely. Like, all the body shapes are still kind of in there and present. But a lot of the important stuff kind of just goes into the hemolymph, which is like in insect's blood.
Goop.
And yes, they do become kind of soupy. And I think soup is a really adequate metaphor because there are some like lumpy bits in there too that are becoming the body parts.
It's a good stew.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
I work with kids, y'all. I gotta come up with these.
Right, I get it.
There might be kids listening to this. Our demographic suggests some younger people listen to this, so I try and keep that in mind. So you talked about doing a lot of pollinator programming here at the aquarium, Stephanie, and one of the things that we introduced a couple of years ago that remains part of the experience you can have at the aquarium, where you actually might learn a little bit more about moths, even if we don't have them regularly on display in the butterfly garden, is the pollinator pathway on our plaza, and that talks about the role that pollinators play of all kinds in native plant development and just helping humans out just in general. And we talk a lot about in our pollinator programming the kinds of things that you can plant, many of which we have planted in those pollinator gardens to help pollinators out. And people often think of that in terms of plants that benefit butterflies or bees. So what are some plants that we can or should be planting at our homes to specifically help moths?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. I think what's really cool is that pollinators, they all have kind of preferred colors of flowers, and moths are going to be they prefer white, light yellow, a little more dull, because then under the moonlight, they're very bright. And then super aromatic, so really smelly. I know here in Tennessee, you can plant evening primrose, this beautiful little cupped yellow flower that blooms at night. Yeah. And those can be beautiful, and they smell, I think they smell good. But the moths will come through. So I would say to focus on different colors and different shapes of your flowers, and then ensuring that they're, local to Tennessee, because those local moths, grew up alongside these flowers. So they're like kind of the perfect combination.
Okay. Rose, anything to add to that as far as plants that you would recommend?
I'm going to, same thing, plant native, pick native species. This is a good excuse to give yourself permission to plant very fragrant plants. And just because moths are more susceptible and more receptive to scent than they are color, unlike butterflies. Moths, if you think of their bushy antenna, those are mostly, a lot of the times they're used for mating mating purposes. Like you'll notice that's one way to tell the difference between the males and the females is the males will always have much bushier antenna, but they pick up like different like chemical signatures and flowers as well as their other species. So generally, anything native, anything light colored, and anything that smells good, you're more likely to attract a moth. And also make sure it's not a species that closes up in the evening as well. That won't do much good.
Kind of important. The store has to be open for you to be able to shop there.
Sure does.
Okay, so we, again, drawing that direct line comparison to butterflies, we often talk about the important role butterflies play in pollinating plants that benefit us. Are moths something that have an impact on plants in terms of pollination that you can let people know, like, this is a direct way that a moth benefits you? Is there a kind of plant that we eat, or that is that we, as a crop, that moths are specifically responsible for pollinating that people need to be aware of that would help them appreciate moths a little bit better?
I know there's one off the top of my head, but I can't remember it. Like, I already mentioned yucca is a pretty famous example of butterfly, yucca is a pretty famous example of moths, a very exclusively moth-pollinated species. Generally, anything that is open overnight is going to be pollinated by moths in addition to butterflies or any, like, day-flying species.
Okay.
I think mint and tobacco, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think tobacco is exclusively moth.
Really?
It might be. I know tobacco is an important host plant for a couple of our species of native moth, as well as some stuff that's not so native. But yes, if you think of, they call it the tobacco hornworm for a reason. All of our hornworms, I think, are either nightshades or tobacco plants they lay their eggs on and provide host plants for. So if you're ever wondering what that giant green thing eating your tomato plants are, it's a moth, and it's fine. It's just not maybe the most convenient for you.
You got to plant a tomato for the moth and a tomato for you.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough. Give and take.
But if you plant some extra tomatoes, you will foster the local hornworm population.
All right. Well, I don't want this being a slightly briefer episode of the show to imply that I don't think that moths are important. If I didn't, we would not be having this conversation at all. In fact, I have a bit of a plague of Indian pantry moths at my house that's not a big fan of. So I've railed against moths more often than I have showed my appreciation for them, at least in my own house. But I hope that in the course of this discussion, that those of you who are listening have learned that there are some really interesting features to moths and some ways that they benefit you that maybe you didn't know prior to listening to this episode. But Rose, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show to shout the praises of moths, and I'm hopeful that you are appreciative of a chance to speak for them, because again, in previous conversations, I know that you have expressed your love of moths, and I hope that you feel like you've been given the opportunity to let people know how amazing they are. Yeah.
Can I give the people one more thing to look up? So butterflies and moths, awesome. Look up skippers and just blow your mind. It's not just butterflies and moths.
All right. Well, now I have my own homework to do. All right. Well, thank you to both of you, and we'll go ahead and wrap up the episode here. If you have an idea for a future episode of the Podcast Aquatic, email me at podcast@tnaqua.org. If you have a question for an expert here at the aquarium, somebody like Rose or like Stephanie, email that to the exact same address. While you're online, go ahead and write us a review or leave us a rating if you have a little less time. Both of those are free and easy ways to support the show. And in the meantime, until next time, remember that every drop matters.